Welcome to the Manifestation and Money podcast, Jason.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so pumped to chat with you. Like I said in our pre-chat, manifestation and money. And manifestation is all about setting intention and taking action. And I know you are the guy for this conversation. So I'd love for you to share with the listeners just who you are and what your story is.
Sure. Well, my name is Jason Yarusi. Today, I'm just south of Nashville in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I have an investment firm that buys commercial real estate. So since 2017, we've acquired a little over $350 million of real estate, mainly garden-style apartment buildings, and we're here in 7 states. We own the properties. We operate the properties, run the asset management until we hold those properties for 5 to 7 years. But that's a long ways from where I started. I started as a bartender, right? So I left school after facing a bit of challenges in my formative years. I lost a lot of friends I wasn't like in a war zone or in a place where like people are in the army, but I had all these friends that just like pass away from like very weird things growing up. I had a friend die in a boat accident. One committed suicide. Another one was in a car where people were drinking, got in a car accident. And then my girlfriend, this was age 16, she got killed in a car accident. So by the time I went to college, I was just kind of lost and dejected. I just really had lost my purpose, right? My parents were going through some struggles financially, right? They had a small business which can be great, but at many times if you're literally the person running the business and you're good at either doing the work or doing the business, but you're not good at both, you can see frustration and difficulties, and they were facing difficulties. So here I go to college and just really lost. And I get a business degree because I had a girlfriend at the time that mom said, you should do business because you're good with numbers. And that was my whole range of thinking how to pick my major, because I was really, really going through the motions of picking majors, right? So I picked this, get out of college with a finance degree, business and with finance. And I move into New York City with really no desire to go into that space. So I did, which was the next step. I started working in bars and restaurants, right? Just like whatever came upon me. And I did that for a number of years. I worked in bars, I worked in restaurants, all different kinds of things. And at that part, it was just like what I did. But what was the through line is you just didn't like what I did, right? I didn't like where I was. I didn't like what I was doing. I didn't like anything about how I was showing up, and it trended through to everything, right? Like the results in my life weren't great. The relationships was in weren't great. And if you look at the steps, is I was doing chaotic things and I was getting chaotic results. And now that just seems master of obvious. But at that time, you're just like, I just can't figure it out, right? Because you just are just doing the thing. You're so in the mix of it, right? Where your whole life seems of an urgent matter because you're just not happy with where you are. But I stayed where I was, right? And that was the key piece, is like, didn't like where I was, but I wasn't making any change. Well, one night, after the things were just going sideways, I was riding my bike home at 2:30 in the morning from one of the bar jobs I was at, and I know where I got hit by a car. And next thing, I get taken to the hospital. I get a pin in my wrist, a broken shoulder, stitches in my face, back of my head. I still have a scar today. And lo and behold, I get out of the hospital a day later. And next thing I know, I'm thinking like, I have to get back to work because I have to make money for rent. And I was like, okay, let's just stop for a second and think about these series. And it was that moment where I was like, okay, well, here's the agreement I have to make myself. I can keep going back to the same thing, but then I have to stop being angry with getting chaotic results because I'm doing crazy things. Or I have to try something different. And many listeners might be in that point right now, is maybe not as dramatic or not in the part, but they want to do something different, but they don't know what to do. And I was in that point. I didn't know what to do. So I just started to do kind of the opposite of what I was doing. Instead of staying up late and like maybe drinking after work, I just go home, go to bed, and get up early, right? Get back to a workout routine, start to read books again. Like I left school, I'm never going to read again. You think of that crazy notion, like never going to have to learn again. But you think of that, right? And lo and behold, it wasn't immediate, but things started to improve because mentally I had started to transition from looking at the negative to looking at some of the positives. And I went from working behind the bar to open up my own bar, open up a restaurant. At one point I opened up and sold a brewery before a storm happened on the East Coast, Hurricane Sandy, and that decimated hundreds of thousands of homes. So at that time, I have my now wife working for me and my little brother working for me in New York City, and we picked up and moved to New Jersey to help dad with the family business. And it was a very niche business that dealt a lot with foundation issues and lifted and moved homes. And he would do 12 jobs a year because of just the intricity of the jobs. Well, that business exploded from 5 or 6 calls a month to 1,000 a day. So we ended up taking that business from that 12 or 13 jobs to about 300 jobs a year, and about a couple thousand we did over the course of the time there. And that led me into real estate, right? And so what I learned from all of this is that you have a goal, and ultimately the way you get to that goal is going to change. but you get experiences as you go, which opens your eyes to new opportunities. And when you start to look at it through a different lens, the opportunities start to appear and you can start imagining the steps to get there. And what I found between the bar job and construction job is I was doing all the work. And it was, if I did, then we could make something from it, right? But if I wasn't there, there was no revenue. So what I found is I had no time. If there was 25 hours in a day, we could have used them, because if we did not show up, there was no revenue, no opportunity. So we kept looking for that point where my girlfriend at the time, now wife, was pregnant with our first child. And we're looking at our days and there's no time. The time is lost. So the biggest piece I was looking for is, how can I get back to a point where I've now gotten positive direction, but I need to get control back of my time? And the word that kept popping up was real estate. So we started doing real estate projects on the single family side, learning from that, understanding that was actually taking more of the time and less of the commitment for us to control the project before we started moving into different things of development, into moving into small multifamily before we moved into large multifamily. And what large multifamily gave us is that we could find these opportunities, put together the plan, the process, the team, and then manage the operation instead of doing the day-to-day work. And that started the process in 2017 of us buying a 94 unit that has slowly grown to where we stand today.
Wow. I love that. And I love real estate too. That was my ticket to breaking away from you being taught you have to grind it out at a 9-to-5 job every day, soul sucking, and you just have to sign up for that till retirement. And that didn't feel good. And then figuring out the real estate piece, I'm like, oh, I can learn. Yes, you have to go back from learning. And I agree too. We're all lifelong learners if you want to get somewhere. Learn how to do something that doesn't require all my time. And so that's fascinating that you have that path too, but yours is way more grand scale than mine. My goal was to get 5 rental properties, and that was what was going to help me sleep at night. And once I did that, then it became a lake property and fun properties like that. But real estate
That's fantastic.
is like a little golden ticket. I find it helps me sleep better at night. How did you take yourself from that chaotic state to getting yourself to have more intention and more, well, less chaos? What's the word for less chaos?
Calm.
Calm. Yeah. How did you flip the switch to get that more calm and more honed in view on your life?
When things feel chaotic in life, you put more and more pressure on yourself and you feel like you're going at a faster pace, but you don't know the direction you're going. You don't really even know where you're trying to end up to, because everything that comes upon you starts to be an emergency. And whether it's just the smallest thing or the biggest thing, you treat them all the same because you're in a state of urgency, right? And it's like if you're in a car, you're revving the engine to like 8,000 RPMs at all time, right? That's how you're like running yourself and running your life, because you haven't taken back control of those steps. And so you look at it, what can I control and what can't I control? And when you break up those two boxes, you can start to focus on what you can control. And you can start to fix that. That could be the time you wake up. That could be your diet. That could be the words coming out of your mouth. That could be the thoughts putting in your mind. It could be the books that you're reading. To what I can't control, right? Things like the weather. You're like, oh, it's horrible outside. And now you ruined your day because of the weather. You're like, wow. But that ruins people's day. It's raining out and that will ruin people's day. When you start looking at that, you can start to just set aside the stuff you can't control and then put focus into what you can control. And then understanding we all want big change, right? If you're not in a great place right now, where it could be anything, if you're out of shape or, are facing financial hardship, you just broke up with a relationship, you want it fixed right away, right? But it's not going to fix overnight without you taking small steps today that compound. So you have to look at yourself outside of where you are and say, okay, if I want to be this person, how am I showing up today, right? If I want to be a healthy person, are the actions I'm taking right now, today, going to lead me on that path? If I want to get to financial freedom, right? If I want to have savings and a 6-month nest egg where I can just not worry about things, are the actions I'm taking today meeting that person that's going to be there in 6 months? Or what do I need to change today? And then you can start listing the things that you're doing that are not meeting that future person. I had a person say to me once, and it was really just a throwaway statement. It was like, many times, it's like we're stuck in a jar and we can't see the label. We can't see how we're showing up, right? Because we're focusing outwards on everything else around us and everything else that's affecting us. But if you have this part in your mind where you have an out-of-body experience and you're watching yourself going through your actions through the day, if you're driving, if someone cuts you off, or just, how you're talking, or just the thoughts you're going to mind, if you were watching yourself, is that the person that meets the goals you want? And if the question comes up that it's not, okay, what does that person do that's meeting the goals compared to where you are today? And when you could start focusing on that, you start focusing on the positive. We don't have to focus on the negative. The negative is going to get filled away, but the positive, that's where you have to put your energy. You have to start being conscious to it. And 98% of our day is subconscious actions, right? Where 2% is actually us focused, constantly focused on what we're doing. So we have to be really positive. If we're having 65, 75,000 thoughts a day and 60% of them are repeated, if it's built on negative thoughts, negative patterns, then you have to slowly break that. You have to slowly erase that. And I like to think of it like a glass of water, right? If you have a glass of water and you take just a drop of black coffee and put it in there, it taints that entire glass of water. If that glass of water was positivity, all it takes that little bit of negativity to get in you just to create and disrupt. But if you have a cup of black coffee and that black coffee is your negative thoughts and you just take a drop of water, right? It makes almost no effect. So you have to be very conscious to try to pull the positive into your life, to try to dissuade and push out the negative. And I get it. Things happen that are not fun, but it's growing to where you want to be. The goal is to go through that and understand that it's not a great position, but there is a lesson there. And sometimes it's not a fun lesson, but there's a lesson there. And you can look at it as a launch pad to the next objective. It gives you purpose when that has happened.
Yeah. And isn't it a hard place to trust that there is a lesson in that moment? Because oftentimes you don't see it till you're further down the path and you look back and you're like, okay, now it makes sense. That part of what I learned there is helping me out so much more in this part of my life right now. And I just want to know, how do you suggest somebody starts forming the habits to be on the more positive side?
So you want to be self-aware about how you're showing up, right? That's really the number one thing. How am I showing up in the moment? Then you have to own it, because you can be self-aware. Like, I'm showing up, I'm really just being awful. I'm not being a great husband. I'm just really not being good to my employees or my coworkers. But then you have to own it. You say, okay, I own it. I'm not going to be that person. And so in response to that, I have to position myself for greatness, right? I have to look at where I want to be and start setting up the traits for that person so I can do the next thing, master the habits that person needs to do to get to the goals. And then you have to be intentional about your execution. And that's the biggest piece, intentional. Each day, it's a reset. You could have a perfect day or a bad day, and the next day resets. You have to get up again and say you had a perfect day. Well, your mind is going to reset, and the next morning you wake up and you might have negativity creep up no matter what stage of your life you're at. So you have to be very wary to just watch your thoughts so you can intentionally go after the actions each and every day. And it's part of the pattern that many days you're just not going to feel like doing these things. But you have to discipline yourself to do them regardless, because you know that's the destination you're on. That's the journey you want to be on. And if you're facing problems, if you want to get away from the level of urgency, start thinking of them in 5-second problems versus 5-year problems. And the 5-second problem is where it's just something that's coming to your mind, right? And you just do it right now because that's all you're going to remember for 5 seconds. And in a year, 2 years, 10 years, you're never going to remember it again. Compared to the 5-year problem, which are far and few in between, which is really detrimental to you right now. Something you really have to put all your energy into. Because when you think of it like that, then the 5-second problems, they're not so urgent. You just do them, you get them out of the way and you move on because they're just not a big deal, right? And it could be anything, right? It could be anything. But in the fact of the 5-year problems, well, then you can truly focus on them and put all the energy to make sure you get the right answer through them. But most of the time, when we are in this chaotic state, we treat them both the same. And that's why it compounds in such a dramatic fashion.
Yeah, that is so true. And do you have any recommendations of tools or favorite ways to keep people on track as they're forming those new habits?
So there's many different ways you can put it. Accountability, if you can find someone who's on the same journey, absolutely. That's great. And if you have a spouse in that direction and they're a supportive spouse, that's fantastic too, right? Or bringing them along the journey with you, right? Because many times you're both trying to break the habits together. And it's taking back accountability upon yourself is the biggest thing. You can get an accountability partner, but you have to be accountable to yourself. That's the biggest, most important thing, is that these things that are happening right now, just turn it back on yourself, right? If things are not going right in your relationship, instead of blaming somebody else, just put it back on you. If your fitness journey is falling off point, it's not work, put it back on you, right? It has to go that part, because when you can take 100% accountability of your actions, you start standing up to the test. But when we have an out and we say, well, it was this, or it could have been that, or these things got in the way, or this, then you find yourself falling off because the accountability has been put somewhere else. There's something else that's in power now outside of you. So it's taking your power back and then just being calm in the moment. If something blows up right now, instead of immediate reaction, take 5 seconds, take a deep breath, and then think through your reaction from there. But we get so stuck in that second of something bad happened and have to react right away to get out there and yell like, oh, someone rear ends me. Could have been 100 things. It could have been 100 things that had happened that unfortunately is not great. But getting out and getting crazy and yelling at the person doesn't help the matter. So are you okay? Well, it could be calm. How can you calmly react in the moment so you can just move your day along and continue to improve instead of constantly pulling yourself back to the mean of where you were before?
Yeah, I think this is beautiful. I think so many people need to hear this message, but why is it so hard for us as human beings? It's just the nature of us to want to blame somebody else. Why is it so hard for so many people to point that arrow back at us and go, I am the reason that this is happening in my life. I am the reason it is playing out like this. And sometimes it's just an equal part in what it is, but you are still a big piece of that. Why is it so hard for us to stand up and just take control over the compass of our life?
Because it's harder to. It's just that. It's very easy to do everything but take full responsibility, because that's the hardest thing, because it means that I have to say that I messed up.
Yeah.
And for other people to stand up and to do that, right? And for someone to stand up and take responsibility, it basically, it gives you a breath of fresh air when you do it, right? And it opens your mind to it. But it's the hardest thing to do, because then I have to prove to myself that I did something wrong, but then I have to showcase to everybody else that I did something wrong. And that's the hardest thing, because it's easier to make myself up on a pedestal. But when I make myself up on a pedestal, I just get stuck in these series of bad actions of actually never growing, because all I'm doing is pointing out everybody else's flaws instead of just going back, like we said before, and being outside the jar and looking at the label of how I'm actually showing up.
Yeah. And you have kids, right?
I do. Yeah.
My kids they're 5 and 9 right now. And I'm seeing like us having this conversation is just because I'm trying to instill this kind of message in my children. I can hear them from the living room. They're having a fight. One of them spills their glass of whatever, and they're like, "You made me do this." And I was like, "How could she make you do that? She's on the other side of the room." And my son will be like, "Well, she said something and it made me mad, so I moved my arm and I knocked it over. So therefore it's her fault." I'm like, "Wait a second." So I'm trying to explain that to their little brains because, like you said, it's a hard message to learn. And there's so many adults out there in the world running their life like that, where they are blaming somebody else for knocking over their water glass when they're physically not even connecting. I just want to know from your perspective, I don't know how old your kiddos are, but how do you parent from this kind of message?
Yeah. And so mine are 6, 8, and 10, right? So we're right in the same mix right there.
Yeah.
And it's that point, they're trying to control their emotions, right? But they don't have that control yet. They don't have that component of control, because right now it's just, and sometimes it's beautiful, right? Because they just say what's on their mind, they talk all these things, and it's so much fun because they're just trying to learn the world, right? But it's very easy for them to part. It's, again, to get them to stop, ask them what they did right in the moment and what they could have done better. And when you think about that, it allows them to be part of the conversation, because there were things they did good. Luckily, it didn't go over and hit the daughter, or luckily they didn't do something to that part, but what did they do bad? They got mad. Okay. So you got mad. Okay. Why'd you get mad? Because my sister said something that hurt my feelings. Okay. But you getting mad, what was the result of that? I knocked over my drink. Well, did your sister knock over your drink? No, I knocked over my drink. Okay. Well, if next time we can maybe say, I don't like, what you said, maybe that keeps us from knocking over the drink. And it just slowing everything down, because life, we think, moves so fast, and it does. If you look at the whole spectrum of the world, like we're here for a blip, like it moves but in our life itself, it moves very slow. And when we can just pause, right, and understand that the day is very busy, but you can make it as chaotic that you want. I move in a fast pace. We have a lot of different projects going on at all times, but I have to keep control in that, because we have a lot of employees that they depend on us right here for the operations. I have to keep control, because if I don't keep control, right, and I get crazy, then they get crazy, right, because they feel out of control, and that just trends down to everything from there. And so as a parent, we have to keep calm. And that's sometimes the hardest thing to do, because we're stressed. We have all our other things going on. We're in the mix. We're doing business, doing family. The kids are screaming, they're fighting, right? And so we bring chaos in there. And I'm not completely pristine in this transaction. I'm guilty too of losing my cool. But the more you can bring it into a calm part, take them aside and just in matter of fact, talk to them in a way that just can help them really figure it out in their own mind and make decisions, that starts to give them a problem-solving notion instead of a blame.
Yeah. I find parenting children almost amplifies real life. Like I'm learning so many lessons from my kids just watching those moments where I'm like, you are learning, you are figuring this out. Here's an opportunity. And it's just fun.
Yeah.
They love so hard too, right?
Hmm.
You get everything amplified. I would love for you to share with the listeners what's going on in your world. You're a parent, you've got all these big things going on, you've got podcasts of your own. So please give the listeners a listen into what
Yeah.
Jason's world's like.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'll add one more thing that helped with my time in the day is that I started to make things that were just my commitments, right? And, work has to get done in its own fashion, but I found that setting commitments where I wanted to be. So I take my kids to school and I coach them in their sports. I meet those. Those are the things that I have to be at. So in between, I have to do the important things. I can't get to my work, my business, and just focus on nonsense all day because I will miss out on the important things. And the important things have to get done so I can make the commitments I have to my family. So I make the commitments to my family, to my fitness in the morning, and that makes me focus and hone in on the important things I need to do in the work so those can be done for me to get back to what I talked about before as my commitments. I do have another podcast. It's called a Live 100 podcast with Jason Yarusi. It's just at Live 100. You can find that in all the usual suspects for podcasts. It's about 5 or 6 minutes, just quick hits, just talking about all the things of just intention, action, and just living life to your fullest. And Jason Yarusi at all social media. You can find me on Instagram.
Okay, fun. I know that you've got a new follower in me for that because just listening to you on here, your way to articulate visuals, you're speaking and you can see what you're speaking about. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today and having this fun conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It was great